Good morning, friends. This is Blossom Johnston, and we're just mixing it up a little bit today. Our typical moderator, Bethany, is on a plane as we speak. So Kimbra and I are going to be giving you this presentation without a whole lot of intro or extra. We're just going to get right into the heart of what we plan to do on this particular nonprofit success lab. So the Smooth Transitions is the title of this, and it is effective succession planning for nonprofit leaders. So last month, Connie Miller, sorry, mentioned that the average executive director only stays 3 years. Well, that's a big deal that everybody should pay attention to. So this month, we are following up with a discussion on the importance of and the process for succession and transition planning for nonprofit leaders. It's a little bit different for for-profit leaders because there's different revenue things that they have to pay attention to. So this is specifically tailored to the nonprofit sector. If you care about your nonprofit, you're going to do what we're talking about today before you need it, because you don't want to cripple the organization that you lead. So I'm Blossom Johnston. I'm the founder of Idaho Partners for Good. And Kimbra, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Kimbra, you're on mute.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Kimbra. I am a catalyst at Idaho Partners for Good, and I am a former executive director of a nonprofit. So this is a really important topic in my mind. And so I'm excited to take us through our learning objectives. Hi, everybody. It's great to see so many folks on the call. So today we're going to go over and hope that we deliver an ability to identify the framework for executive succession and transition. If you're both a founder and a director, you're going to want to listen with both ears. Understanding the basics for designing plans for executive succession and providing tools and resources to help you with either transition or succession or both. So let's take a second and find out who's here. So using your chat, would you drop in your primary title? If you are a founder and a director, would you put that in the chat as well? Because we would love to know. If you're a board member, we'd love to know that. If you're representing a nonprofit, tell us that. I will tell you a little secret. Connie said 3 years, but founders and directors tend to stay a little bit longer. All right, I see Nika's is in there. Founder, okay. Thanks, Caitlin. Oh, we have another founder. Thanks, Harley. Oh, and representing Idaho STEM. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, I would love to ask you another question. Again, we're going to stay right there in chat. Would you please enter on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 is I know nothing. 5 is, man, I got this. What is your experience with succession planning? Again, just drop your answers right into the chat. And we have oh, look at that. There we go, right in the middle, and learning, and yeah. Oh, we have an expert. Excellent, Michelle. You and I are going to talk, because I got to tell you, here at Idaho Partners for Good, we are not experts, but we are practitioners. In fact, we have 2 projects going on right now, and literally right now, I am on my way to another project that we're conducting to help with the succession and transition planning. And our very own Idaho Partners for Good is going through this process. So we're all going to be learning all together.
Kimbra, just one moment. Harley says she cannot hear. Can everybody else hear? Okay, great. Just double checking. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. My volume's all the way up, Harley. I'm not sure what's going on. Well, Blossom, I'm going to turn it over to you from there.
You betcha. So these two words are fundamental to this planning process: succession and transition. They are two very different things, but they are aligned and work together. So first, succession. It is a comprehensive plan developed with staff and leaders to ensure a smooth transition from executive director to the new leader. You're focused on transitioning the responsibilities, the relationships, and the institutional knowledge. The owner of the succession plan is the board of directors, okay? The transition plan, on the other hand, is created by the executive director with the help of the board to support their transition. So they need to know that the board hears them and that the executive director is equipped to transition. So that the owners of that are both the executive director and the board. So first off, it is not a succession plan. It is not a transition plan if it's not written down, okay? Executive directors and founders in particular are famous. And I'm speaking to myself, so I'm pointing 10 fingers back to me. Famous for holding it in our heads and our hearts and not getting it down on paper. So that's the very first thing I want you to know, that you may have the best succession plan in your head, but if nobody else knows what that is, then this transition of responsibility, relationships, and knowledge will not happen in a way that anyone will be happy about. So if you want to start a lot of fights, then just keep it in your heart and your head. But if you love the mission of what you're doing, then get it on paper. So the succession planning creates clarity, it creates legitimacy for your organization, and it provides a roadmap. All right, I'm going to just stop and see if there are any questions about the difference between succession and transition. And you can use chat or you can just unmute.
Good job. I think you've laid it out well, Blossom.
Awesome. Okay, then let's keep moving. Alrighty, so the value of succession planning. There are some key return on investments for you actually documenting your succession or the organization's succession. So transition is the leader, succession is the organization. So you're preserving the mission. And the reason that's so important is because your internal and external stakeholders really need to know that it's going to be okay beyond you. The next one is about minimizing risk. So have you thought of the impact of the founder or the executive leaving on turnover? Turnover of employees, turnover of your board, and the loss of donors. So if you want to minimize risk, then you need to pay attention to this. When it comes to organizational thriving, you need a way for beyond you, for the leaders to follow after you. So you don't want to just have an organization that's dependent on you as the founder. You want the organization to prosper into perpetuity, well beyond you. The systematic process, that's everyone knows what to do and who will do it. That's the bottom line. And then the talent pipeline, we've got to make room for next generation leaders. If for no other reason, that's a great reason to design your plan, is for you to open space for the next generation of leaders. So let's talk now about the key challenges. What are some of the key challenges that are associated with not having a succession plan? I listed some of them, but I'm sure there's more.
I think one of the challenges that I see is we tend to foster tribal knowledge if it's not written down. And founders, again, are notorious for being a tribe of one and holding it all intently inside. So I think that, not writing it down, not having a plan, we lose a lot of just the basics of, that, again, that concept of tribal knowledge. It doesn't transfer if we don't have a mechanism to transfer it.
I am well aware of this whole process because Idaho Partners for Good, we test out pretty much everything we then make available to the world. So I have gone through this process of transition planning, which we have a template for, but also succession planning for Idaho Partners for Good. Because what we do is so important to the Idaho nonprofit ecosystem and the philanthropic system that we have to ensure that this keeps going after I move into a different position.
I think too, the relationship with your donors is important, and that's another challenge that's at risk if you don't have a strong succession identity that helps them connect to the mission, vision, and values, not just a charismatic leader.
Exactly.
I imagine just like in the
If I just-
executive, it's like an organ implant, right, to the body. Whether with that transition, you have to be really careful, methodical about how it's being done, or else the body will respond to it. And you'll need to have an understanding of how people are going to respond and how to support them through this transition.
Absolutely.
Young, I love that metaphor
Yeah.
because when it is a founder, it feels like the heart is being taken out for the people around them.
Mhm.
And so to put a new heart in requires a great deal of care and it requires a plan. So thank you for that metaphor.
Well, let's look at then who has
Can I just add-
responsibility.
Oh, somebody else.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if I just add on to what Kimbra was saying? So by articulating a plan, by getting it on paper, out in discussion and out in the open, I think one of the really wonderful side effects of doing that is that it brings up issues that are silent that might benefit from some development with the group. So by raising a question about one aspect of the transition plan or a succession plan, then you're able to actually discuss it so that everyone genuinely is on the same sheet of music, and you've been able to gather the knowledge from your board or the expertise to be able to even better develop that plan instead of it just being a founder's idea put on paper.
Yes,
Very
perfect. Yes, Michelle. And you can also identify who to lean on, what support systems you have, their strengths, who to lean on, so that that new executive coming in does not feel like they're in muddy waters or having to navigate it all by themselves. But with exactly what you're saying is that with this heart transplant, we know exactly which organs are going to support it and how and what manner, and what the next 90 days to 5 years would look like for the organization.
I love where this conversation is going, and it's so powerful to go into this next slide. What we've slipped into very naturally is something that a lot of organizations do. They start planning current and future at the same time. And I'm going to suggest that we just pause, step back, and realize that transition planning and succession planning are a now thing for the benefit of a future thing. If we try to do it all at the same time or try to build transition as we're onboarding a new director, it's just chaos. So separate them, put them in their right bubble, and then look at who has responsibility for it. I loved when Blossom said earlier, the purpose of a transition plan is so that founding director is heard and knows and feels the organization is equipped moving forward. The author of the transition plan is the executive director. Now, the board owes the director the courtesy of looking through that and giving their thoughts and their approval to it as well. And it might be conditional approval. They may have some thoughts on that because some things that founders want aren't necessarily always possible. But but the author of it, the original author, for good, for bad, and for ugly, is the founder or the executive director that's in seat now. The approver is the board. When it comes to the succession plan, that succession plan is most often best built off of the transition plan, and the author is the board of directors. Typically, that's a collective effort with the current founder as well. So there's a give and take in that. But just keep in mind, transition is the current director, succession is the purview of the board. They own the succession. So with that in mind, let's take a closer look at a really valuable resource that Idaho Partners for Good has created just for this process. And this is what we teach and train and work through ourselves. It's the 10 key components of a succession plan, all in a checklist. And that very first one is what we've been talking about. It starts with a director's transition plan, helping directors create their exit strategy.
So I'm going to add on to that we highly recommend that if possible, get some kind of a coach that can help that director put their transition plan together, because oftentimes every one of us, we have blind spots, and we need coaching and mentoring no matter how good a leader we are. So I highly recommend that at that point in time, get some kind of a coach to help you. And we've got lots of them with Idaho Partners for Good. The talent pipeline. All right, smart directors will always be building the future generation of leaders. That's just what smart leaders do. It's not about them. It's about how do we cultivate the kind of culture where people emerge naturally. And so you want to take a look at who's in your pipeline right now. They might be a volunteer. They could be on your board. They might be a donor. You don't know until you start looking at it and building that process.
Absolutely. And board education and engagement. We just said the board owns succession planning. Sometimes they don't realize that and they're not equipped for it. So ensuring that the board not only understands the process, but has the right people in place for the lift that's required is really key to the succession.
And Kimbra, I think you're going to bug off a little bit early so you can do some of that, right?
I'm actually going to do the next one, the
Okay.
staff education and engagement. That's where I'm headed off to here shortly.
All righty. Well, if you want buy-in from your organization, then you've got to have staff engaged. They need to know how it impacts them. They need to know what the process is so that they don't feel like they need to jump ship.
Yeah, in fact, we're doing an exercise that is how to reorder your universe. So we have every member of the staff. We have over 20 people in the room with us, and we're putting the founder, the current founder, in the center of the universe where she has been for decades. And now, as part of this exercise, just to give you that real world picture, she's actually just going to roll herself right on out, and we're going to have a void in the center of that universe, and the rest of the staff gets to figure out with us and solve for how do you navigate through that? What do you need from the person that goes into that place next? Again, staff education, but also that engagement is so critical. And it goes right along with knowledge management. We have to make sure that the knowledge that's there, whether it's in the heart of the director or the heart of key staff, or if it's just kind of intuitive because it's been going this way for a long time, is it written down and easy to duplicate and transfer to the next person?
And that's where founders often have one of their biggest challenges is in that one right there, that knowledge management. I know a lot of executive directors, and they really do have a hard time getting on paper the things that are in their head and their heart. So just start using your phone and start taking notes on your phone that you can then send to yourself. Alrighty, communication and marketing plan. This is so that your stakeholders, whether they're internal or external, know what's going to happen. Timelines, your board and especially your board and your finance team need to know about how to budget for, so you can help or have your comms team help put that messaging together clearly and simply.
And Michelle, you alluded to this earlier, the organizational assessment, really identifying what are the strengths and opportunities within the team that you have, but then also understanding what are the weaknesses and the threats that, you know, could come from inside or outside, and really taking a deep dive into your organization as it is. And our organizational capacity assessment is a fantastic tool to help start that process.
Standard operating procedures, this is also an area that I have a big gap in. And so thankfully, Kimbra and others have, that is a sweet spot for them and it's in their wheelhouse. And so they help me with this particular thing of putting together standard operating procedures. It is something that is super important, especially because as a founder, I just do things a certain way and they may not always make sense to other people. So they help me back up and stop and say, all right, tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they help me document it. So it's a super important piece of this checklist.
I'm going to meddle for just a moment. If your SOPs are in a 4-inch D-ring binder somewhere on a shelf and you can run your finger through the dust, they're probably not up to date and they're probably not being followed. So let's digitize those. Let's bring them out, dust them off, tie them to your metrics for performance. And so that if it doesn't need to be there, get rid of it. If it does need to be there, measure it, right? All right, succession timeline and budget. Again, realistic timelines and budgeting for succession. So many times founders work for free. You're not going to find a successor that will do the same 90% of the time. So you need to budget that war chest for the things that you're going to need. The other thing I know about founders is they usually do 3, 4, 5 jobs that you might need to hire 2, 3, or 4 people to do. So go through an accurate assessment and budget for that succession. If you want it to run as well or better than it's running now, you need to hire the talent, the skill, and the quantity of people, your greatest asset, to help you do that. And that takes money.
And then finally, your project management. This is an area that, again, we have a deep bench of people who have project management expertise. And so they help us to identify, you know, how do we do this, by when, how much of it, who's responsible. So it's super important for you to have a way to manage not just the succession planning process, but in general, whatever you're using for project management in general for the organization, you're probably going to want to set up a project specifically for this.
That is not my sweet spot, but I'm so thankful that I have people that do. We're in the 3rd phase of the project that I'm on right now, and that checklist has 102 items on it. So thank goodness somebody besides me is thinking through those things.
So I'm going to add for those, most of the people on this call are founders. So just a few things for founders to be thinking of specifically because you started the organization. So your successor is definitely not you. They will not be like you. They will not act like you. They will not think like you. So you have to remember that you're not cloning someone. You've got to give them the latitude to be their very best as the leader of the organization. You have held on and embodied the organization's identity, the vision, and the values in a highly personalized way. So there's going to be some unique challenges and dynamics from in a founder transition. You have to separate the role of executive director from your personality. You have to engage stakeholders, as diverse a group as possible. And for those of you who are not founders that are on this call, honor the heck out of the founder's legacy. You cannot do enough to honor that founder and then make space for the new leader. You as the founder have to set the example to make space for that new leader.
We're finding it's really helpful to just kind of level set every time you have these conversations, because it is personal, as Blossom just said. But if you can put yourself in the position that it's not trying to change you or what you're doing or where you're at, but you're setting the role for what the next leader is going to have to carry. So it's always think about this in terms of future state, not in your personal current state.
Yeah. And so that checklist probably felt super daunting. I mean, it's a big deal, no lie. So how do you even get started? All right. I want you to pick something on this list of 5 things. Are you going to start with building relationships with key leaders? Are you going to want to conduct an OCA, organizational capacity assessment? Are you going to start by educating your board through the introduction of this checklist? Are you going to start just thinking about who are the potential board members that we could set up a subcommittee that can help support the succession and transition planning process? And, or, is it time to initiate executive coaching and create a draft transition plan? This is where we would recommend you start. Don't let it get overwhelming. I mean, that's that's super easy to say, but as executive directors, we've got our hands in multiple pies and we wear probably 10 hats. So just pick one of these things. The relationships piece is one that I would highly recommend that you take a look at starting with first. And that's because the wheels often fall off when founders leave, because they're the one that cultivated all those donor relationships. So you've got to really be thoughtful and strategic about how you're going to message your relationships or message to your relationships with key leaders. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
I would say also that third bullet point there, educating and introducing the succession checklist, that is a really simple and economical step that Idaho Partners for Good consultants can do with and for you. So if you don't want to be the one carrying that, you can hire Idaho Partners for Goods consultants to do that workshop with you and your board. We've got that down to I think it's about an hour, hour and a half with questions. And that's a great way to just kind of, when you know you're ready, there's a real problem with staying at the party too long, right? So help your board get ready for you to get ready to go.
All righty. Well, Idaho Partners for Good will always aggregate some of the best resources for you. We'll go out and we'll find those things for you so that you don't have to go look and wonder whether or not it's the stuff you should be paying attention to. So all 5 of these are resources that have different, I mean, some of them may have some of the same types of resources, but the National Council on Nonprofits, the big thing for me with that one is their cross-training of staff and their board, the tools they have on the board's role in ensuring continuity. With Board Source, they have both planned and emergency succession planning toolkits. North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, they really have lots of great resources on equity considerations in hiring. The Nonprofit Partnership, number 4, they've got practical toolkits for executive succession planning. And then the Stanford Social Innovation Review, that one is, that resource I really like is the Thriving Post-Transition. So each one has great resources, and I'm not going to recommend one over the other, but these are vetted resources that we would love for you to take advantage of. Alrighty, well, that was a lot of information really fast, but we wanted to give you a place to frame your succession and your transitions while also looking at one thing that you could do. So we've got some experts here today, and I'd like to open it up. What kind of questions do you have for us in regards to either succession or transition planning?
Well, I would ask the experts, what questions should we be asking right here?
So I'll throw out one that sometimes happens. What about when you encounter resistance to this idea of succession planning and considering that many people here are founders and or executive directors, does anyone have tips or ideas on how to navigate resistance?
Michelle, resistance from the executive director, resistance from the board?
I guess resistance from any of the stakeholders who would be critical to pulling this off.
So that really speaks to phase one of the project that we're in now, with the client that we have. They've actually been trying, several key lovers and longtime supporters of this ministry have been trying for over 15 years and have found that resistance. And what we found that worked was slowing everything down, building relationship, and being certain. You can be sure that if you don't understand it, most people will say no. So making sure that we're clarifying, we're making the steps easy to understand, and that there is just a process in place. And then going back to what Blossom said, that trust translates into honoring the work that they've done, the value that they've put into this, their heart for the place that they're sitting right now. And those three things together really do tend to break down the walls and open the doors for better communication.
So I will answer it from a different perspective and put my founder's hat on. Oftentimes, founders have a tendency to select board members that are essentially yes people. That's just the way it is. That's the data. And it's on purpose. So then when you get to this place where you want to transition, they don't really know their roles and responsibilities well enough to help you. So I'm a big believer that if you train your board well on what they're supposed to do, what their roles and fiduciary duties are, then they will be a great help. And if there is a founder that is very resistant to the thought of transitioning, well, you probably want to bring some kind of executive coach in to help them. You may not be able to get them there, and the nonprofit may die on their watch. That has happened. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll give a different perspective too, more from a private industry. And then we also have another question in the chat room. From my perspective, it's more looking at it is change, and so there will be resistance. And so that's the key of succession planning in your transitional document, is to map out all of the challenges that you're going to face and how you'll overcome them as a team. Storytelling is really powerful as far as how did this nonprofit become to be, and the story behind the founder and what the mission and the goals are going to be for the next 2 to 5 years, right? And then really figure out who are your change agents. It's not just one person. Yes, you're going to bring a new center of the universe in, but there's going to be multiple change agents. And as long as you redirect the conversation as well back to your vision, values, and goals for the organization, and then leaning on those change agents and your board of director, you'll be successful through this whole process. All right, so our next question is, how do I look for my succession?
Say more about, I'd like to understand better the question.
So I asked the question, because being founder and running the nonprofit, well, it's officially been a nonprofit for 2 years, but doing the same work for 10 years. Um, and and I realized that eventually I'll have to step down, and I'm okay with that because, like you said, I'm doing all the jobs, um, with a few independent contractors helping me, about four. And how do I look for what am I looking for when I'm looking for a succession? Am I just looking for people who are passionate about single parents, or am I looking for someone who has nonprofit background? How do I look for my succession?
That is such an important question, Nika. Thank you. So first and foremost, um, whoever this next person is has to be mission, vision, and values aligned. If they are not, it's a no-go. The next thing that I would look for is, and I had my coach asked me to do this, and I started doing it about 6 months ago. My number one strength is achiever. And so if I don't check things off on a daily basis, I just don't feel good about myself. So he said, all right, start just ticking all those things off on a checklist. And then I gave it to him, and he helped to design a job description based on the things that I normally do. And then we went to best practices. So what does a leader of an organization like yours, what are the qualifications based on best practices? So there's a lot of good stuff out there, Nika, that can help identify what you should be looking for. And it would be fairly easy to help you find that.
Yeah, I think too, I would add to that, because you wear so many hats, as you put that job description together, make sure you're isolating the things only you can do,
Right.
that only a director can do. If someone else can do it, is that a position? Do you need an administrator? Do you need operations? Do you need an accountant? If those are not they're more common but necessary. But your job description for your successor should be something that only you can do when you evaluate their skills for the role.
Yeah, that makes sense because I'm actually looking for managers, let's say, to run the events, and organize that. I'm looking for a manager to do the case management of leading the Zoom support group chats and the hotline, and then managers for the life coach. But that's not necessarily an executive director running the whole shebang.
I love that answer, Kimbra, because it's a question that I remember learning a few years ago. There's a question that every executive director needs to keep asking themselves on a very frequent basis. And it's what Kimbra said. What are the things that only I can do, or this organization goes away? So really think about, of course, you have to hold the vision. As a leader, you have to be the vision keeper. So that's one thing, no matter who it is. But you for your organization, what are those things that only the executive director or CEO can do? Michelle Young, other thoughts?
From an ethnography background, I always like to put myself outside of the picture, outside of the square, right? And ask myself, if I was new coming into this role, or if I was new coming into this organization, what might I need? And how would that look like? And that kind of helps frame kind of a baseline as far as what do I look for and how do I get started?
Awesome.
Blossom, I would add one more thing that's kind of germane to this, is maybe it's the flip side of this coin. What if we're not finding that successor? What if we're pushing this rock uphill? You and I talk a lot to nonprofits to look for other options. And I think in your transition plan as a director, considering what are the other options to still fulfill the mission, vision, and values. Could you partner with another existing organization? Could you roll up? Is it time to dissolve. And one of the key questions I heard someone ask was, how would the world be different if my organization ceased to exist? And based on that answer, a lot of times you can find your other options for mitigating that loss.
I will add that that is really a very heartbreaking exercise, but very, very vital. So this past year, I was tasked with coming up with all those options. So what if we don't get the funding that we need? Well, we came up with 10 different options that we can select from. At any given moment in time in our future, our board can pull the lever on another one of those options that is not what it looks like today. But if I hadn't taken the time to actually stop and look at what those options are, then we wouldn't have them to leverage for the future. And I'm happy to share those. All righty. Okay. The reason why I asked you to choose one of those 5 is because I want to know what one specific action that you will take in the next 30 days to begin or continue planning in your organization. And drop that in the chat or pop on, unmute, and let us know. Okay, I'm gonna move to the next one. So we are always in the market, literally, for quotes and testimonials on the work that we do. So if you have been a part of past nonprofit success labs, did anything happen as a result of attending one of our past workshops? And, or do you have a story or quote that we can use to help promote Idaho Partners for Good services? So we're going to actively begin promoting, especially with Kimbra in the seat that she's sitting in as catalyst. We are going to start doing a lot more marketing, and we could really use testimonials and quotes about the work that we've been doing. So I am going to keep moving us, because I know you're going to have to leave here soon, Kimbra.
Yeah, Blossom, I do want to point out though that Michelle just put in, if she was in this position, what would she do? As an expert, I always want to hear, what would you do if you were in my shoes? And I love her answer. I'd start testing the waters with key relationships to determine who my allies might be, and identifying what resistance you might come up with. So that was a great answer, Michelle. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, next Monday night, come join us. We love to be in proximity with the nonprofit sector. So next Monday night, it's Kegs for Cause. So come on out to Pay It Brewing, network with some of the most awesome human beings on earth, including those that are on this call right now. And next so I was being cute by just putting part of Brett's face on this slide because he's kind of the covert operator. It's next month, it is on cybersecurity for nonprofits, and Brett Brandon with the Idaho National Guard, and Foster Cronin, one of our board members and former Deputy Secretary of State, who he led the cybersecurity for elections in Idaho. So the two of them are going to be tag teaming, and it is going to be a Monday instead of a Thursday. So just note, and please help us to share out the information on our next nonprofit success lab. And with that, this is how you can get a hold of Kimbra and I. And we are here, we both feel super passionate about this work that we get to do, because we know that when nonprofits thrive, our communities and our families thrive. So with that, I will say thank you so much. And Kimbra, do you want to have the parting comment?
I just want to thank everybody for showing up. This is such an important topic. And from every seat I've ever sat in, I always wished that this had been more a part of everything I've done. So I hope you see this as a gift and an opportunity, and go make the most of it. And we're here to help. If you need help in any of these areas, either from a resourcing point for our nonprofits or from a consulting point for our services that also support the nonprofit arena, let us know. We'd love to be a part of that with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.